We'll get started here in just a minute. Let the thing load up a little bit. Move my water out of the way so I don't knock it over. Okay, so this week we are doing the second part of a turtle tote. Just to show you, this is actually one of my patterns. It's called the Total Turtle Tote. And just to show you, I do have my own that I made for myself. Just to kind of show you the size. Maybe back up a little bit. Got stuck on a cord. So this is the size of the Total Turtle Tote. It is pretty good sized. If you see, mine is actually fronted with clear vinyl. It has two handles to carry it like this. Now, the one that's different about the one I'm making for a customer is that they have asked for the straps to go like on either side, the front, the top, and bottom, so they can carry it like this, and also to add a crossbody strap. It's easy enough to do. If you want to add a crossbody strap, I'm not going to go into that here. I will show you where I have already added it. But in my cube pattern, the cool cube, I have actually listed how to add a crossbody strap to this. So, but just to show you, when you unzip this, it is a good size on the inside. And yes, you can see it's Haunted Mansion themed. But as you can see, and I actually have some of my cubes inside. And yes, they have clear vinyl in them as well, or at least some of them, or they are made out of clear vinyl. And this is what I use to carry a lot of my sewing supplies with me when I am traveling, if I need a bunch of them. So that is what the Total Turtle Tote looks like. And we have the one I am working on for a customer is Harry Potter themed. She wanted a specific fabric that I had in my possession. This is going to be the interior of her bag. It's a Disney themed Harry Potter fabric. That's a custom fabric. It's an older print. I did a embroidery on the exterior. This is the front, or what will be the top that opens up. As you said, it says, "Welcome, wizards welcome, muggles tolerated." And she is a Gryffindor. So we have the Gryffindor webbing, which is from Emporium Threads. And it just has the characteristics like nerve, chivalry, brave, courage. And it also has the Gryffindor lion. And as you can see, it is riveted to the inside of the bag. It does go all the way through. And this is so it holds the weight of it. It also will have a crossbody strap. So that is the top of the bag. And the bottom of the bag is I've added this wand in also her house colors. So it matches the other stuff. And last week we made our zipper panel or main body of the panel of the bag last week, where we may put our zipper teeth with these little cute little zipper pulls, so they're not overlapping, so you can see them. There's the Gryffindor lion and Harry Potter on his broom, and of course we have Gryffindor zipper tape. And what I've added in the meantime, this is how I will hook a crossbody strap. And so when it is where the way she wants to carry it, it will have a crossbody strap on either side. And I have used thicker rivets here just to hold the weight, as well as sewing it on. Like I said, if you want exactly the details on how to add a crossbody strap, that is actually in my Cool Cube pattern, how to add a crossbody strap. And it's the same premise. You just need to figure out where you want placement. So what we're going to do today is we are going to add the top to this, and we are going to bind it on the inside. So we will be, if you had not already done so, I had already, last week while y'all were with me, I marked my centers, as you can see right here, and also down on the vinyl as well. I used a silver Sharpie, made it very easy to see. I also marked the centers on all four sides here. And the reason is that you need to make sure all your centers match up. So we are going to, turn this wrong side out. And as you can see, it is big, so it does take a little manhandling. So, like, see, if you were to look through it, that's the size of it. It's pretty good size, but this particular customer is planning on using this for a thing to carry her crochet in to make crocheted blankets. So she wants it big enough that she can fit the blanket inside of it. Okay, so the biggest thing is we match our right sides together. And we are going to clip. See, I've got my little handy dandy bowl of clips. And one just jumped. My little sleepy dragon guards my clips. Now, with a bag that is mostly vinyl, you will want to use clips over pins. However, you can use staples as well. I do use staples because you can just take them out, and they are a little more permanent than the clips, at least while you're sewing. So the big thing here is I'm just trying to make sure my brain's not wanting to work. Webbing is tucked down into the center of the bag so I don't sew through it. Okay, and we are going to pull out the said stapler and staple at least where the center points. I don't know that I'll staple the rest of it because I hate having to do that much through. Okay, wrong stapler. Here we go. It's called, sometimes you use I have this little handy dandy stapler that I use, but I'm just doing it for the center points because I don't want it to move while I'm pinning the rest of my clips. And that's pretty much the long and short of it. And this just makes it easier while you're doing this. And I will go ahead and add some clips in the meantime, in between each center point. And we sew these together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So once I get this done, I will move everything to the machine and we will sew these together. Okay. All right, I've clipped that. Okay. Now, you'll be like, well, what if your corners don't match up exactly? That's okay, because if there's any excess, we will trim it off the corners so that they are flush with each other. Seems like the internet is being a little screwy and we're losing people here and there. So we'll see how well we do with this. Hopefully everybody can catch in if they want to. I hope everyone is doing well. Tomorrow is one day I will not be sewing because it is my wedding anniversary. I will have been married for 21 years tomorrow. So my husband and I always try to do something special for our anniversary, even if it's just spending the day together. So not going anywhere this year, but starting to just going out and spending the day together. It makes a difference too. One way to keep your marriage healthy, just spend time with each other where you enjoy each other. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. It takes a minute to get this clipped, but I wanted to show y'all everything before I put it together, so that's why I didn't have it pre-clipped. I did not show myself attaching the webbing, or if you use vinyl, you can use vinyl instead of webbing. And in my pattern for this particular bag, I do go over how to make your straps using vinyl versus webbing. And you can use different widths of webbing. What I normally use is 1.5 inch wide webbing, or I use 2-inch webbing, usually. One of the two. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. We are just sitting here, not a lot of sound, less sound than normal. I think usually my youngest daughter is still up, but I think she went to bed a little earlier. So, not as much chatter when she goes to bed. She's 9, so she definitely has a lot of chatter. Whereas my teenager just disappears into her phone or video game or something of the like. Which is not a problem. But if y'all are interested, I can show y'all what else I'm working on right now. I'm working on a quilted backpack. One of the newer patterns from By Annie. And I actually did some fancy straps and stuff as well. Did my first time foundation paper piecing. So it was interesting. Not something I would have thought I would enjoyed, but I actually really did. So we have our last corner to go around, and then we can sew. Go to the machine and sew. So we are just getting this clipped. And I just had a clip break on me. Gotta love when they collapse. It's not the first time, won't be the last. It's the second one today, actually. So it happens. You use them long enough, and they will break eventually. The metal ones don't seem to as much, but the plastic ones do. That's why it's good to have a bunch of them in your house or sewing room for the legs. All right. So here's the thing. We have it all pinned or clipped in this case. So you can see it's all clipped all the way around. The little holes are where I've got my staples, kind of holding it in place at those center marks. And so if you want to see the inside, that's what the inside looks like right now. It is upside down at the moment. Now, when I start sewing this, I don't start sewing it where the zipper tape is. I sew it at the back. And that is because we want to start and stop at the back. Because the zipper tape's difficult enough that you always want to start at the back. You don't want to start where you have zipper tape, like in the middle of the zipper tape. That's not going to help you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this big thing to the sewing machine, and we're going to set it down like this, and we're going to sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and sew around. All right, move my little dragon out of the way now. I'm going to move y'all to the sewing machine. Now, we're not going to get the bottom done as well today, but we will get the top, and I will show you how I bind stuff in my bags, the ones I design, and how I sometimes do it in other people's designs. Because everybody has their own way of binding. And I have found this is what works best for me in the years. The biggest thing here, I just hold it down as I'm sewing, just so I can see what I'm doing and I won't get weird shadows. Let's do that. There, that should be a little better. Okay. So when you get to the corner, you kind of have to hold your corner flat because that is where the zipper tape joined to the corner or to the back. So it is a little more fiddly. As you can see, it likes to be annoying. and turning it too early can cause issues. So, gotta love when the zipper tape does not want to agree with you. It's wanting to bulge out or in instead of out. So it makes sewing around that curve very difficult. There we go. Got it to lay flat. And that's the biggest thing, is getting it to lay flat. Just take your time going around those corners. You shouldn't have to worry. All right. So if you notice, I just go slowly so that I'm not going, I can go a little faster on the straight edges than I can around the curves. And a random piece of thread that decided to take up residence there. And we're just sewing around. It's the only thing about this bag, it's so big. It does take up the space on the machine, and trying to rotate it around makes things interesting, to say the least. And we're going to go around this corner. So we get the same thing going around the last corner. And that is making sure that this is laying flat so we don't have any weird folds in the zipper tape or anything like that as we go around. Like I said, if you have vinyl from your top sticking out above your zipper tape, don't worry, we will trim that down. The big thing is making sure you're still at a 1/4 inch seam allowance going around the corner on your zipper tape. It's okay if the other is slightly off, because we do trim down any excess. Okay. So we are going a little bit at a time. Now, we do run into the fact that we are going to get to our zipper pulls in a minute, because I've got it in the center. So I'll sew close to where I am going to get to the zipper pulls. And then I will lift up my foot so that I can push them past. Just turn the bag slightly and push them past the foot. So basically we are already past our zipper pulls. We don't have to worry about trying to sew beside the zipper pulls. So we got the first pull through. And now we are getting our second pull through. Maybe. It's being stubborn. And this is one of the harder parts about this. But I will say the bottom actually goes on a lot easier because you don't have a zipper tape. It's just to the bottom of the zipper panel or gusset and your bottom. So there is no zipper tape to deal with, so you're not having to move pulls or anything like that. I always just do the top first, mainly being because with the being able to sew, you want to be able to hold it flat under the machine as so. And once you have the top done, you can just leave it unzipped and it's still like sewing the top on again as far as how flat you can lay everything. If you did the bottom first, you could, but can't say it wouldn't be more difficult. A whole lot more difficult. Okay, so yet again, we're getting ready to go around a corner. I found a little thread I forgot to trim. Sometimes you find those things when you're going around. So right now I am pushing my zipper tape down and out of my way. I was curious to know what people do while they sew. A lot of times I listen to books on tape or watch a movie. Curious to what other people do. I know some people listen to music. I do that some as well. A lot of times I just have something mindless on that I don't really have to pay attention. So a lot of times it's a movie I've seen 20 or 30 times. And I can just half pay attention while concentrating on the sewing. That doesn't mean if I'm at a part, like right now, I'm working on a bag I've not sewn before. I'm almost done with it, but I've had to pause whatever I'm listening to several times just to read that a little better and go, huh? Because some of the wording is not the clearest in some ways. But some of the most questionable parts they do have videos for, which is why I started doing some of these tutorial videos for my patterns as well, or any sewing patterns, just to help with people who are learning to sew or learning to sew bags in general. So I can share my tips and tricks that I've learned over the years sewing bags, and in the last 4 years designing bags. Not put one out since last year. I have something in the works. I'm probably going to be releasing a Switch 2 carrier, not my Gamer's Night Out, not the wallet, but an actual bag so you can carry games and possibly other things as well. So let's see. This is our last corner to go around. Now, as far as binding, in my case, especially in one like this, I like to use the fabric that I'm using for the inside as my binding, so it's less visible, or at least not as noticeable. I have done contrasting. I have done bias binding tape that you can get, and there went a clip that just flew. So like I said, I have clips that fly at me, break on me. I don't think that one broke. It just got enough pressure, it shot. But I have used bias binding tape. I've used waterproof canvas as my bias binding. And in this case, I am using the woven fabric that the inside of this bag is made with. But I'll tell you how to prep that from any of my patterns that involve binding. I'll show you. I've cut it long enough that it can be used for this entire piece because this is custom fabric, which is normally 56 to 60 wide, not 44. All right, so I'm gonna switch all around for a minute. We're going to trim our threads right here. And we're gonna take out our little 4 staplers I put in earlier at those corners, or not corner centers. Like I said, if you put staples in, don't forget to take them out. I'm not saying that. It's more like when we sew the binding, it's possible you'll hit the staple and you could break a needle. Ask how I know. I've done it. Not exactly fun. Then you have to go still find where the staple went off to and have to change the needle in your machine. Okay, so we have, and that's what I use for a staple remover. It's my little handy dandy one. All right, so as of right now, we have a fully attached bottom. And just so you see, I'll turn it right side out so you can see what it looks like. This is not bound yet. But just to show you what it looks like. Once you will have it all sewn. So in this case, this is particularly what this one will look like when I'm done. And you'll see the crossbody straps on the side. So hopefully my customer will be very happy with that. You can see the inside. Now, the bottom, I actually have it to be upside down from this so that when you open it like this, it will actually match the same direction as the top. So if you look at the bottom going right side up, this is actually upside down. But once I get this attached, it will be going the same direction as the other. So I do know there's logic in that. So just to show you, this is what it looks like when all the zippers are pushed out and everything like that. But now we are going to bind it. So you will see all that adds all that lovely detail. I love having a unique zipper because it really helps tie in, especially since right now you can very definitely tell this is Gryffindor themed. All right, so we're going to push this back wrong side out so that we can do our binding. So as you can see, back inside out. So we have our strips of binding that I have cut. I have two of them, one for the top and one for the bottom. What we're going to do is we are going to fold it in about 1/2 inch of our raw edge, and we're going to start that. And I'm going to start at the same place I just started, which is on the back. So I'm going to switch out, and I'm not going to use any clips for this part right here, except for the starting part. Not starting part. For when I actually sew the other side of the binding, I will actually use clips, but right now I do not. I actually use my hands just to hold it, because sometimes as you go around, you stretch the fabric, whether you realize it or not, and that doesn't mean it's going to line up exactly. So the best thing I do is I actually start it, and I'm going to put it right sides together with my center mark right here. And we're going to sew on that same seam we just did, also at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to move y'all back to the machine. I'm going to get me a sip of water, and then we will get moving. Now, so, just dropped the bias tape. Well, it's still on my lap, but talking makes you a little thirsty and your throat grit dry. All right, so we have our 1/2 inch right here, and we're going to pull our thing down again just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to adjust that a little bit. There we go. So here's my center point right here. And see, I can lift that up, and since I marked it on the vinyl part, I can actually see my center point right here. And I like to have the seam at the center point because it's going to be at the back of the bag where people are less likely to notice it when you do it. Okay. So we are going to sew this down. Like I said, we're doing this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you're like, oh, but I should do the binding like this. And I'm like, well, and if you're doing quilt binding, you actually fold it together. I don't do that with this. Bag binding and quilt binding can be the same, but also very different. Because I'm actually doing binding for a quilted bag right now, and it is totally different. But the bias tape is also wider. So you cut it as actual like quilt binding. And this is when that really long body gets in the way. And of course, I said we were going to trim the corners that way they didn't match up. It's not so much a big deal yet if you haven't done your binding. It's more when you're tucking your binding, but we can also do it as we come around the corners. Usually I would do that beforehand. All right, so I just noticed it. Not every corner needs to be trimmed, but I will trim them before we wrap our bias binding. Or should I say binding? I know a lot of people, this is not cut on the bias. I do not cut when I'm doing binding. I do not necessarily cut on the bias. You do not have to cut on the bias. For quilting, you do. For some quilted bags require you to make bias binding. This particularly, I do not use bias binding. I just use regular strips across the fabric. So that is just personally what I do. I only use bias binding or make bias binding, should I say, if the pattern particularly calls for it. It's not my favorite thing to do. But you can use store-made bias binding for this too. A lot of people do. There's nothing wrong there. I've used it many times. Partially sometimes when I'm lazy. I can tell you that. And don't want to make any type of bias tape. But I will put it down the same way as if I do with my own. If I use store-made, at least with my bags. Like I said, certain bags, you want to do it certain ways. I said, after you get the initial attached, it goes a lot faster. And I am going to trim down my corner here as I'm coming close to it. And sometimes it's just easier to do that. But we have our little thing. We are going across, making sure everything lays flat. And yet again, we are going to get to the point that we have our zipper pulls and we will have to move it past our presser foot. And one way, this is actually easier now to go around this corner with that zipper tape because it's already sewn down. It's not going to move on you randomly, which does help. The only thing you might happen is if something gets in there and gets wrinkled or something and you have a bunch up of the zipper tape, which occasionally does happen, but not usually once you're adding the binding. Usually that's when you're first adding the top to the zipper panel. And I apologize for this. Oh, sorry. Been sneezing all day. Allergies are going a little nuts, so we are almost to our zipper pulls. So I am going to go ahead and move them past the presser foot. And as you can see, if you turn the bag slightly, makes it a lot easier to move said zipper pulls. See, I've already moved them to my corner and they're out of my way. Now, when you're doing the other side of your binding, you can't avoid them completely because we will eventually unzip and it'll be on both sides. So we are about halfway around. And I will make sure to go in depth on how I do binding. And I know most people are like, how are you having both sides raw edges? Well, that gets fixed in the next part. And I will show you how. So curious to see if there's anybody other than the US that's here watching. Always interested. Sometimes I have had other people. I know right now a lot of people in the world are watching the World Cup. I'm not the biggest soccer fan. I'm a pretty big baseball and basketball fan, but my brother played soccer for a good chunk of his high school career. So I know a little, and I watched college soccer, but while I was there, don't know a lot about it other than the rules. So hopefully y'all are following along. Like I said, right now we are just sewing around our next to last corner. And we are going to get this bound. So next week I will be sewing on the bottom and binding that, and I will show you the difference between binding or sewing on the two different top and bottom. Apparently I'm shedding black threads everywhere because I am using a black top stitch thread at the moment. Sometimes I will use a contrasting thread. This case I didn't want the attention brought to the thread and not from the design, so I did a thread that blended with the vinyl on the outside instead. So everything has been sewn with black thread, but it helps draw, and except for the exception of the webbing when I sewed it to the outside, I used a burgundy thread so that it would blend into the webbing. Okay, so we are going around our last corner. Gotta push this last one flat so that we can go around. Sometimes that last corner is the one that wants to be the most fiddly. Okay, so we're sewing that last little bit. And I will show you how we do it so you have no raw edges showing. Apparently I have a thread though. So what we will do is we will overlap this, and remember we had folded down our raw edge here. So we are going to overlap this, and we are going to sew about 1 inch past that initial seam. Okay. And then we'll trim off the excess. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to flip y'all this way for just a minute. And we are going to trim our threads yet again, our start and stop points on top and bottom. Okay, so what we will do now is we are going to, one, trim off some of this excess fraying because it's driving me nuts. We're going to pull our binding to the back side. Trying to get all our excess frayed ends off at the moment. It's a pretty fabric, but it likes to fray like nobody's business. Hi, Annette. Glad to see you. We're just getting to binding. So I've sewn the binding on the top. So what we're going to do now, you can see that's my overlap right there. So I take it. And now this is not how everybody does binding. Everybody finds the way they do binding best. So I take it and I fold it down about 1/4 of an inch. Or I fold it down to the, I fold my fabric down to the actual vinyl, and then I fold it over again. So basically, I'll unfold it and show you. So I take it, fold it down so that my raw edge is encased there. And then we fold it, and I'll fix it once you will sew it down 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Of course, I'm going to fix that. Of course, I wasn't looking at that, so that was not straight. But just to show you, I will show you how I do it in just a second. So I'm going to clip it. I'm glad you can make it, Annette. Late's better than never. So I'm just clipping this all the way around. I always start with where the two join first, just because it makes it stay in place a little bit better. All right, so, well, the thing is and I will do binding next week as well, Annette, so if you don't catch all of it this week, you can go back and watch it. And my pattern goes detailed on how I do it. But this is how I do it for this. And like I said, I'm folding it over to the other side, covering up the seam I just sewed so that you don't see that seam. Now, I clip all the way up to the corners, but I don't clip in the corners because I found 9 times out of 10, I pop it off while I'm doing it. So I just do it up to the corner, and well, that actually reminds me. Let's see, which was the corner I did not trim? This one. I just kept sewing, or is it this one? This is the one I missed trimming. Like I said, if you forget to trim, you can do it at this point before you do the bias binding. It just needs to be equal with your zipper tape. So that was the one I forgot to do, and I was just taking care of that while I'm thinking about it. So like I said, we fold over and then fold over again, and I just fold it over to that, and I'm going to clip it down. And with this being made out of the same fabric, and I have done this with waterproof canvas, you just have to know waterproof canvas is thicker, so your seams are going to be thicker. So if your machine can't handle that, don't do it binding as waterproof canvas. Even if the rest of the bag is waterproof canvas, use a woven fabric or use the store-made bias binding instead. And my machine is a semi-industrial, so it can actually handle it. So that's the reason I do it. If yours cannot handle it, don't try, because then you're going to have a broken needle sewing through all those layers. And waterproof canvas is a lot thicker than woven. And this is the thing, I don't have SF101 on this. When you use binding, you don't use interfacing. You want it as thin as possible just to cover the seams. But we are going all the way around. Clip, clip, clip. No, Annette, you missed me talking about, I was going to show y'all the bag I'm working on. It's actually after this that I should be done with, hopefully tomorrow or Friday. I'm making a quilted backpack, one of the newer patterns by Annie. And I actually did some foundation paper piecing for it. So, whoops, didn't mean to make y'all shake. All right, so we're working our way around. All right. clipping all the way around. And I said, this is not, a lot of this is clip here, pin this here, mainly because you want it to not move while you're binding or sewing something together. You want it to stay where it's supposed to. And I use a decent amount of clips on binding. You don't have to. You could use very few. And there's some people who use very few, and I have some people who, when they're doing binding, there's a clip literally every well, I'll show it in just a minute. I'm making what's called, it's one by Annie that is called Leader of the Pack, and they just released an addition to that, which is making foundation paper pieced flying geese for the straps. They also have fancy for the front pocket, but I wasn't going there. First time foundation paper piecing, I was going just the straps because I thought I really liked the look at that idea. Not going the fancy route. Yeah, probably I've got to attach the front to my gusset and then finish putting the back together and then add that to the other side of the gusset and then bind them both. And I'm done with that bag. You're talking about making bias binding. Now that one requires bias binding on how they bind. And I had to make a 26 and or something, I don't remember, a big square for bias binding. So we almost all the way around. We're on our last little bit. I think I need to grab a few more clips. Thought I had enough. I said, I don't overclip it, but there are some people who will literally, there is no space between clips, which is, I'm like, how do you even get started if you have no space for your clips? Where do you put them? Where do you put your presser foot? That's my thought process. All right, and yet again, when we start in the back because you're less likely to see it. So, all right. So just to show you, there's all my bias binding, or not bias binding. I've been doing too many by Annie patterns lately. All my binding that is clipped, and because it is of the same fabric, it blends. It doesn't show. So, all right. So I'm going to, before I move that over to the thing, I'll show you what I've been working on. So this is the Leader of the Pack backpack. If you can see all the quilting and everything, you can more in the lining and everything that I've done. Right now, the front is completely done. It's clipped to the gusset at the moment, but if you want to see, the inside of the front is right there and all that and everything, zipper. But the foundation paper piecing of the handles, I can grab one. I was gathering all my stuff for my backs on the table. So that is all the foundation paper piecing and then the binding on that. So it went all the way down. Main reason I was doing this is I'm making my daughter a one for school, and anytime I do a pattern for the first time, I make one for myself. So if I have any snafus, they're in my bag, not hers. And I had one snafu, but I'm able to kind of fudge it, and it's not going to affect me. So, but yeah, there's my flying geese. I did my lining as what they quote the main fabric and my main fabric as my background fabric, so that it blends with the rest of the bag. So, all right, I'm going to move y'all to the machine, and we are going to sew this binding on. Let's rotate you a little. There you go. All right, so this is 1/8 of an inch from the edge of your binding. You're going to sew this down. we just go a little bit at a time. And once we get around this first corner, then I'll show you how to make this a little easier. Because right now you're like, that thing's a bulky thing to move. And yes, it is. And this is the same way I put my binding on for my cube, the Sweet Treat. And this is, like I said, this is my preferred way of binding. This is not how everybody binds. This is what I have found works for me. And I have how to cut your binding, how wide to cut it, and everything like that. And if you're using very thick fabrics, you can always make your bias binding or your binding a little wider than what I say to do in my pattern. So what we are doing here, we are going around this first corner. And like I said earlier, I do not clip the corners because this is where if I clip it, you see how much I'm having to manhandle it, it will maneuver itself in the air. It has hit me in the face, flown off where I don't know where it lands. So I have found it is just best to not clip at the corners. Okay, so we're just going to go a little bit, like about halfway up this first side. Okay, so we have our zipper pulls, and we are going to unzip our zipper. And we're going to unzip it all the way around. So all you see me kind of moving stuff around at the moment, but I'm actually unzipping. And like I said, since this is a double zipper, because you want to be able to open it to both sides. And this is going to make this a whole lot easier to sew. If you look, that got a whole lot flatter. The big thing is that now your zipper tape is here and very visible. When you're sewing, you have to make sure it's flat so you don't sew through your zipper teeth. So we're just sewing a little bit all the way around. And importantly, I'm flinging clips everywhere. All right, so we are getting to that the next curve. So I'll move that clip out of the way. Just making sure I'm going around my curve the right way. And that my zipper tape is not going to get sucked in some weird sewing or anything like that. But my daughter, who is getting the backpack sewn, I'm making her the quilted backpack. And hers is a really cute Science Girls fabric. And all her accents and binding are going to be, and lining are going to be tie-dye. So, and I've got little beaker zipper pulls and stuff like that. So we went around that first corner, and you can go back and even check, oh, my zipper tape's nice and easy to move around the corner. So I'm fine. I did that corner fine. So we are about halfway through. I will say, as far as sewing this versus the cube's a whole lot easier because it's a whole lot smaller as far as binding. But it's still not hard. It's just more like, can I handle moving something that's this big around my machine? That's the biggest thing you got to say. Am I comfortable with moving something this big around my machine? Now, since I put my webbing on a different way, one thing you have to make sure is that you're not sewing your webbing into your zipper teeth. Or when we get to the bottom, onto your bottom, you just have to make sure your webbing is staying towards the middle. This is also the case when we are sewing it the regular way because the webbing still will try to get in your seams, and you just have to make sure it stays clear. So we're going around the third corner. It's a really pretty tie-dye. It's like pinks and reds and oranges. It should be really cool. The fabric is a black background fabric that has all kinds of colors. It has test tubes and little girls in lab coats and stuff. So it should be really cute for a 4th grader. But yeah, I will. Now, in the near future, I'm going to be sewing a couple more of the Place for Everything bags because I have a customer who ordered 2 of them. And then I have another one, even though I already have one. I love that bag. And I have another one planned for myself that is, I'm not going to use any of the mesh that it calls for. I'm only going to do vinyl because I have the new, my brain's not wanting to think what the line's called. The newest Tula Pink, that is the ocean themed one. They had clear vinyl that is printed for the first time ever. And I'm going to do that for all the zipper pockets instead of mesh. So that should be kind of cool. It's going to make it a little stiffer, probably heavier, but it's going to be a first for me doing that. I've done some vinyl and some mesh for all the ones I've done. So this will be the first one that's all vinyl. So it should be an interesting test of my abilities and materials. Let's put it that way. Nothing like wanting to challenge myself. Okay, so we're getting there all the way around. We are on the back side. And yes, now that it's laying flat, you're like, well, I could have started off with it like that. Well, it's not the easiest. I always find it's best to go around that first corner with it zipped, then to unzip it. And that's a personal preference. So you can unzip it to the top, but it's also good practice for when you do the bottom because you can't unzip anything and make it lay flat. Because yet again, it's just straight. So the Tula Pink clear vinyl, oh, it's gorgeous. Floral Reef. It's called Floral Reef is the line. Okay, so we have our binding. And it is all sewn. And what a good test. Once you get the hang of putting binding in, if you look here, there's at my edge of my seam. There's the edge of my seam. Now, there are some places that it's not quite as pretty, mainly going around those corners sometimes. But it is very clean. It is not in my zipper tape. And the biggest test, turn the bag right side out, right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to zip it up. And the biggest thing is when you go around these corners the first time, you have to kind of hold it that first time around. After that, it doesn't really have an issue. It's kind of like making it think about it. All right, so the first side, or the front side in this case, is now complete. So we have that right here. This is our front side. Our zipper pulls. Back it up. Pretty good size if you look beside my head. But yeah, that is, next week we will put the bottom on and bind yet again. So if you want to watch that again, Annette, I'll definitely be doing binding again. And just to show y'all, if y'all haven't seen the Floral Reef, it's a gorgeous line. Let's just say I have a fascination with ocean life. I love the ocean. not the hugest fan of the beach at times because I burn. But the floral reef, this is the clear vinyl. Like you've got some shells. This is the one I'm in love with. Isn't that gorgeous? And then this is the one that's the ombre of like the waves. And just to show you, I have them in the fabrics too. So this is part of the fabric line. There's the shells. Here's the blue colorway of all the corals and stuff. Here's the purple colorway of all the corals and stuff. This is what I'm going to use as my lining and binding. I mean, not lining, my accents and binding. This is what I'm using as my lining. So it is a really gorgeous line. And that's the webbing that goes with this line. And there's a purple colorway and a blue colorway. I'm more partial to blues in a lot of ways, so that's why I went with the blue. And I got all the blue zipper tape and hardware from Social Therapy. Yeah, I actually pre-ordered. I was scared that the clear vinyl would sell out. That's the only reason I pre-ordered. Otherwise, I probably would have just waited. I'm excited for the Legendary as well, coming out in October. I have a little high appreciation for Tula Pink. So, but yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. This is hopefully in the near future. And I have these gorgeous shell zipper pulls. They're buried down in there, but they're from my handmade space, but they're 3D shells. So they work really well. So I will see y'all next week, and we will finish up this bag, and I'll be able to send it out to my customer. So I hope y'all enjoyed that, and I will see y'all soon.